Hey guys, I am Game Advisor and welcome back to another Icarus guide. Today we're going to be looking at the different attachments and what they all do, which ones are good, which ones are bad, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. There are actually two different alteration benches which are going to be required for you to make attachments. This will be the basic alteration bench and the powered one, the advanced alteration bench. The advanced alteration bench will allow you to make all the same ones as the basic one, so there's really no need for a basic one if you have the powered one. Either way though, they're both still good and they both have a lot of attachments in them. With that being said, what are these attachments? Well, let's go ahead and just start going through them all. First up, let's go over the melee. The melee attachments include a lot of things. You've got melee damage attachments, and again, a lot of these attachments will have tier 1 and tier 2 versions of them, so just keep that in mind. Tier 1 is going to do 10% and tier 2 is going to do 20%. Tier 1 is pretty cheap with only iron, leather, and refined wood, making it super easy to make. However, tier 2 is going to require platinum, which is an annoying resource to get, as well as some epoxy. Now, I'm not going to go over the resources for every attachment, but I will be mousing over them as we talk about them so you guys can get an idea as to what they actually cost, so just feel free to pause if you want to check it out. The 10 to 20% melee damage ones are honestly really not that great. It is a nice mod, but again, it's not that impactful. Unless you are planning on knifing a boss all the way down or something, or knifing a bear to kill it, you're really not going to hardly ever use it. Therefore, I think they're probably some of the worst mods you can actually make. You've also got the attack speed attachment. Now these are 10 and 20% attack speed, with the second tier one costing composites and carbon fiber. And for those of you who don't know, composites are a huge pain to make. Therefore, you're probably not going to use it in an actual run. However, the extra 10% attack speed you might use on something like a cave worm dagger. This is simply because that 10% attack speed is going to make you poison something a lot quicker. Not a big deal, but it's also good for gathering, as if you put it on a gathering tool, it'll gather 10% faster. Next, you've got the prime meat attachments, and these ones, I'm going to be honest, are pretty garbage, as you just get more yield from butchering. We don't really need it that much, but hey, it's something. And to clarify, butchering means placing it on a bench or cutting it up with your knife. So you're not going to be actually using the bench, but you will be using the knife. This will only go on knife attachments, in case you didn't know as well. It does also give you a chance to find additional rare meats, but again, not that big of a deal for most players. Next, you've got carcass harvesting. This will allow you to get extra bones and fur. Again, pretty much a totally worthless one in my opinion, as you don't use those resources that much. You've also got the leather attachment, which just gives you more leather yield, but again, pretty worthless attachment in my personal opinion. You've then got the gold attachment, the copper attachment, the platinum attachment, and you've got the titanium attachment, each requiring slightly different resources, but at the end of the day, they each give you the same bonus. You'll either get 25% for the tier 1 or 40% for the tier 2 in yield of their respective things. To be honest with you, the only one I would recommend you maybe consider getting is the copper one. The gold one's going to require platinum, which is a huge pain, but the copper ones only require 4 iron ingots and some steel screws. If you're doing a tier 4 mission, it might be nice to get an extra 25% copper so you don't have to travel to an extra cave or two. Again, not a big deal, but it is nice to have. Following that, we have the reaping attachment, which is just going to go ahead and give you extra yield whenever you reap plants. You've got the repair speed attachment, which is going to be put on hammers and simply make it so that you repair it faster and consume less stamina. That's pretty much it. Not really that useful, to be honest with you, unless you're living out of a ginormous fiber house, but hey, it's there for those who want it. And then we've got the best ones, in my opinion, which are the damage-related ones. You've got the bleed, poison, and electroshock attachments, which do their respective amounts of damage at a 40% chance. Bleeds will cause the target to take damage when they move. Poisons will cause them just to take ticking damage, although it be a little bit lower than the bleed. And electroshock will cause them to kind of get this little stun effect and take some damage. Therefore, I think electroshock is the best, and since they all cost about the same amount, I would recommend you go with that one. They all also give an extra 5 melee damage, but that's not really a big deal. The electroshock, however, combined with a poison cave worm dagger is absolutely insane and does a crazy amount of damage. It's great for taking down armored bosses, so I would recommend you give that a try if you're ever struggling with them. Now, next up are the armor attachments. Armor attachments are pretty strange in which ones are good and bad, so we're just going to kind of go through these again like we did the last ones. The first one we get is the supplemental respiration attachment. Gonna be honest, pretty worthless. All it does is prevent pneumonia and give you some health regen in caves. Whoop-de-doo, who cares? Rarely will that ever be useful. You then have the next one, which will give you stamina regeneration during a storm and increase your exposure resistance. This can be good if you have some crummy armor, but again, not that big of a deal. It's more so just nice if you happen to have the materials to craft it. Following that, you have the supplemental filtration attachment, which will give you a chance to resist poison effects. This is great for fighting cave worms and when you're fighting the big giant sandworm boss. Otherwise, you're not going to really use it. So in those circumstances, it can be useful, but otherwise, not worth your time. It does also give you minus 20% water consumption, but that's not really an issue in Icarus at this point in time. Following that is the calibrated grip attachment. This will give you reduced stamina consumed by tool actions and reduced wear rate of your items. This is really great in Outpost, however, it is rather expensive to make the tier 2 for the 30% bonus, but the tier 1 is pretty darn cheap, so it can be useful if you're grinding up to say a tier 4 workbench because you have to for a mission anyways. I would actually recommend crafting this one and throwing it in your hand slot armor simply for that reason. Next is the aerodynamic attachments. These will give you increased climbing speed, reduced stamina consumed by jumping, and plus 15% swimming speed, each of these being 15 or 30% based on which one you make. They again aren't that expensive to make, but at the end of the day, climbing speed really is only used in ladders at this point in time. Jumping maybe is a little useful, and swimming is again maybe a little useful, so I'm just going to be honest, skip it. Don't waste your time. Following that are the rubberized attachments. These will give you falling resistance and a chance to avoid a sprain whenever you take fall damage. Actually, pretty overpowered if you put them in both slots and wear your backpack, as you basically just can't take a lot of fall damage, and you can't get a sprain if you're wearing the Traveler backpack one that gives you the extra move speed and reduced sprain chance. So, could be super useful on a long distance trip. At the end of the day though, they're still pretty expensive to make, so unless you're grinding to tier 4, I really wouldn't waste your time. Then we have the noise suppression attachment. This one is interesting because it gives you that 20% crouching move speed, which can be useful, and a reduced perceived amount of threat. That means your aggro radius is going to be smaller and you're not going to get threat as quickly when you get near an enemy. This can be super good if you can't handle polar bears yet. Now, they are super easy to deal with, but if you are struggling, they could be useful. Following that is probably one of my favorite attachments in the form of the pockets attachment and advanced pockets attachment. These will give you extra suit inventory slots, either being 2 or 4 based on which one you craft, and extra carry weight, with that being 5 or 10 based on which one you craft. They also can go in 3 different slots, making you able to carry an extra 30 kilograms and 12 slots of inventory. That's a lot of inventory. Would recommend you check this one out if you're ever doing a grind mission where you have to get all the way up to tier 4 anyways. Next are the plating attachments. These will go on your chest and your legs if you decide to take them. In total, they will either give you 20 or 40% health regen and 5 or 10% physical resistance. Great if you're struggling on a boss, otherwise you'll probably never use it, so again, totally up to your discretion if you're going to use it. Following that is the tracking attachment. This allows you to see world bosses on the map. This can go in your helm slot and is very useful in specific situations if you happen to need to hunt down a boss. Otherwise, really doesn't matter that much. You get 15% crit damage, which is great if you're trying to one-shot stuff with a gun or a bow and you weren't already able to do it, but not that big a deal. Then you have the nutrition attachment, which is one of the better chest attachments in my personal opinion, as it allows you to have an extra buff in your stomach. If you do have the talent, this means you can have 5 buffs, which is a huge deal. That is a lot of extra stamina, health regen, or whatever other effects they give. Again, most of these are pretty expensive, so I would say don't bother unless you're struggling on a boss or you need it for crafting up to tier 4, but hey, they're there if you want it. You then also have the recovery attachment, which basically just makes it so any debuff you get is 20% less long. Not a big deal, not honestly worth it, even though you can put it in 2 slots. Now let's move over into the range section of the video where we cover the ranged attachments. These are the ones I know a lot of you care about. First up is the basic scope and advanced scope attachment. I'm going to go ahead and spoil it for you now. If you equip this, you will not get a scope on your gun. Sadly, it just doesn't offer it. I wish it did, but it didn't. The 20% aim speed and 50% aim speed bonuses are nice, but not really very impactful. That's just how fast you pull up your gun. What's really nice is the zoom on them, which is 15 and 30% for those of you who are struggling a little bit to hit your shots. Next are the trajectory modules, which increase your arrow speed. This is not firing rate, this is how fast the arrow moves through the air. Again, not that big of a deal, kind of worthless in my personal opinion. But the better benefit from it, which both give, is that whenever you fire a projectile, it will become highlighted. This is super useful if you're using extremely expensive arrows. Otherwise, totally worth this attachment and would not bother. Next is the Strengthened Strings Attachment. This has two different variations, with the first one giving you 10% arrow speed, the second 20%. Again, this is how fast an arrow travels. You then get minus 15% wear rate of the items, not really a big deal, or 30%, and minus 25% stamina consumed by the item, or 40% for the better one, and 10% reload speed versus 20% reload speed for the advanced one. This is nice only because it allows you to fire faster. 10% faster, this is basically just attack speed. That is all it really is. It is nice to have, but it is not that big of a deal at the end of the day. It'll help with your damage output whenever you're fighting bosses or bears, but otherwise, don't bother. Next is the Silencer Attachment, which will increase your stealth damage by 20% and reduce your perceived threat by 15%. Again, perceived threat is how quickly they aggro on you / their aggro radius. Nice to have, not that big a deal. 20% stealth damage is actually pretty nice, but again, not that big a deal if you're already one-shotting stuff. The advanced variation is going to give you 40% stealth damage and 30% perceived threat. And once again, just like the low one, same rules apply. Following that is the Flexible Frame Attachment. This will reduce the carry weight of your firearm by 50 or 75% and increase the move speed while you're aiming down sights by 25 or 50%. Again, nice, but not that big of a deal. Following that is your Economic Attachment. This goes on bows and crossbows and will give you a minus 5% projectile break chance, or 10%, and a 25% wear rate of items, or 40% wear rate, depending on which one you choose. Break chance, not that big a deal, just going to be honest with you guys. Personally, I'm never really too worried about losing some stone arrows or something, so hey, it's there if you want it, but I think this is one of the worst ones out there. Next is the Rapid Fire Attachment, which I personally think is one of the best ones available. This gives you 25% rate of fire, which is how quickly you can shoot that bow, 25% reload speed, and 50% charge speed. So I would actually recommend you build it, however, it does cost composites, so keep that in mind whenever you go out to craft it. Next is the Hand Cannon Attachment, which will allow you to have 40% projectile damage or 80% projectile damage, and only goes on pistols, as well as increased crit damage and damage dealt to hardened points. This is awesome if you're going to use a pistol. Otherwise, total garbage, just going to be honest with you. If you're not using a pistol, you're not going to even bother with it. But if you are and you do decide to use it, this can make your pistol hit pretty darn hard with 80% increased projectile damage and 40% crit. That's a lot of damage. Next is the Extended Chamber Attachment, which also goes on your pistol and will give you 2 extra ammo capacity and 25% reload speed. If you didn't know, the pistol in this game only has 1 bullet, so this is actually kind of insane. Being able to shoot 3 shots back to back is a big deal. So these pistol attachments are honestly some of the best available and actually make the pistol a viable weapon. Next is the Lightweight Frame Attachment. This will give you 25% movement speed while aiming down sights, or 25% reload speed, or 40% of both of those stats if you get the advanced one. These are only usable on crossbows and honestly are nice, but who the heck really uses a crossbow unless you're using an exotic one? So since you can't put attachments on exotics, it's kind of worthless. I'm just going to be honest with you. Next is the Prototype Notch Attachment. This will give you a 45% chance to fire an additional projectile and a 25% projectile damage increase and a 25% damage dealt to hardened points increase. This is actually good for crossbows. Again, no one uses them, so I don't understand the point of making them. If you do use them, hey, cool, like here's a good attachment for it. Same with the pistols, but again, no one really uses these weapons, so they're not that big of a deal unless you're using an exotic one for the crossbow. Following that is the Sniper Scope Attachment, which is usable on the rifle and gives you 30% zoom while aiming, 25% crit damage, and 25% damage dealt to hardened points. The advanced version is basically the same thing with slightly boosted stats, but again, not that big of a deal unless you're trying to snipe polar bears in one shot, in which case, if you're not already doing that, they're not that hard if you've got a rifle. Let's just be real. So maybe a little useful on bosses, and that's about it. After that is the Hunting Scope Attachment. The Hunting Scope Attachment is honestly pretty cool because it allows you to see enemies highlighted. This is only usable on the rifle, but is especially useful because it allows you to see things like deers and wolves that are hiding through the trees and makes it much easier to hunt them down. Unfortunately, it costs a fortune, so you'll probably not be using it for that purpose at that point in time. But hey, again, it's there if you want it. The next attachment is the barrel widening attachment, which just makes your shotgun kind of hit a little bit harder and have less accuracy. You also get less crit damage, so I don't know who would actually craft this, but hey, it's there. I mean, if you want to have a shotgun that's less accurate and hits for 40% more, so it's only useful at absolute point blank range and does less crit damage if you hit their head, it's an option. I would not craft it though. It's pretty bad, to be completely honest with you. And our last attachment today is the narrow barrel attachment. This does the exact opposite of the previous one, where it makes it so that your shotgun is 40% more accurate with the advanced version and 20% with the regular, as well as gives you 25% crit damage with whichever one you get. Now that is extra useful and a lot of damage. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, there are a lot of attachments here. There is a ton for you to play with and experiment with on your own time and see which ones you like. If I'm being completely transparent though, most, if not 95% of these attachments or so are not going to be used in an actual game. If you are using them, it's probably because you're struggling on a boss, or you happen to already be at that tier because you had to go up there for some kind of building mission or something like that. If you were going to make them for bosses, I would recommend you look at the ranged and armor category, as those are the most useful. You could also do the whole shock poison dagger thing, but tool gathering rates to me just aren't worth the time it takes to spend the materials to make the attachments in the first place, along with the tables and all the other things you gotta do. By the time you make them, who cares? Because you could have just spent that material trying to actually finish whatever mission you're doing. But again, at least the ranged and armor mods are somewhat useful in some cases. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to comment down below if you guys think I was wrong about any of the mods, or any of them are better or worse than I portrayed them. And I want to give a big shout out to our channel members, which include Caustic FPV and Jim Phillips. Thank you guys all so much for watching this channel and supporting us that way. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more Icarus and other survival game content. Otherwise, I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you next time.